Welcome to the Manzil Ahmed channel. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters of faith. Um, Today we are going to watch an interesting video by Lilly Gaddis, and she kind of explains a little bit of her core beliefs in this video, and we're going to kind of debunk some of them, kind of help our friend out. You know, sometimes people have the wrong ideas, so sometimes you just kind of have to help them out a little bit.
Hey.
What's up, folks? Welcome back to the show. So as you saw in that video, just a typical one in millions of the videos that we see running around the internet. Don't even have to go looking for them. They quite literally come looking for you. Of a black person disrupting a space where civil society goes to get groceries. I don't know exactly what the backstory of that was. It looks like he was like grabbing somebody's shopping cart. Maybe he was trying to shoplift and they were, you know, like a citizen's arrest thing. Whatever the case, today we're not going to be talking as much about black people. We got to talk about our country, America, the United States. And this will be of interest to Americans who are from here, whose ancestors built this country. I'm not talking about anchor babies. I'm not talking about people who come here a minute ago and call themselves American. Well, I guess the immigrants today are not even doing that. I'm talking about real Americans, real heritage Americans whose ancestors and forefathers built this country. Okay? And this will be of interest to European listeners and my American audience as well. America has gone to shit, okay? If you go to any other country, particularly any European country, you go there and you feel refreshed. And it's not just because you're on vacation. It's because you're around white people. You're around a culture that has historically been white, that has always been white, that was settled by whites. And
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. First of all, when you say white people, as in European people, that's actually an extremely diverse group of people. You can divide people up into German, French, English, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and all of these languages. There's a reason why they're separate languages, because they each have their own separate culture, which is quite distinct from one another. And even among the Germans and the English people, you actually have the original Germanic tribes. So you have the Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes, the original tribes that are associated with what became English people. And that also has a crazy history too, because the language that we speak today as English, this is not the original English, which is Old English, um, and check some. So, anyways, so with Old English, that's the original English, and that actually has a lot in common with German and Dutch. Um, but then people from Normandy like moved over, so there was like a lot of French people, and there was for a while there was a bit of a conflict because like you would have the peasants who would speak French, um, and then uh, the courts would be in English, or is it the other way around? The peasants speaking in English, and then like the courts would be in French. I'm not sure, but eventually, like the language kind of got merged, and it borrowed a lot of stuff from the French language, and it became Middle English, a distinctly different language, and the ancestor of modern day English. So, as far as English is concerned, if you go back, you can go all the way back up to Middle English, and you can still understand the people. You can still understand what they're saying. But as soon as you step over to Old English, you cannot understand what they're saying. That language has been lost forever. Um, so so that's just from the linguistical side. Um, and here's the thing too is when you're talking about Europeans and you're talking about white people, you're actually making a reference to Rome, ancient Rome. Because and if you go back even further, you're actually making a reference to Greeks. Because Rome was built off of a lot of like the Greek culture, and even the language Latin is based off of Greek, um, and that was spoken. Yeah, that was spoken in Rome quite widely, um, and so the people that originally conquered Europe, the original Romans, the original purebred Romans, like they do not look like you, Lily. They look more your like your average Greek. They look more Mediterranean, like Italians, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the French. These are the descendants of the original thoroughbred Roman people that conquered all of Europe. Like, um, like I hate to break it to you, Lily, but you guys are a descendant of a conquered people. Sure, you guys preserved a lot of your culture because, like, the Germanic tribes, especially Gaul, um, they held out for a long time. So Rome could never really get its claws into like Germany, and when I say Germany, I'm also including England, what we know today as Great Britain. And in Great Britain, that was not always settled by English people. There are Welsh people, there's Irish people, the Celtic people, and there was also a group of indigenous people that used to live there before the English people came in and conquered that area. So it has quite a bit of a history. So this culture, this Western culture you're referring to, this traces all the way back to Rome. The very people that conquered you, Lily, they conquered your ancestors. Maybe not directly because you look more Germanic. So even though your name is your surname is more of a Scottish, kind of Irish type of name, um, it's actually yeah. Like judging by your physical appearance, you look like more like a descendant of the original Germanic tribes. Um, so yeah, like Rome never really made its way quite into Germany. Maybe towards like the end, there was like some kind of trading going on, so there is some kind of a cultural exchange, um, but it never quite conquered the the German tribe side of it. But every other part of Europe was pretty much conquered. I'm not too much sure about Russia though. It's Russia, isn't it like more like the Byzantine Empire type of thing? Because they're very Orthodox and everything, Orthodox Christians and everything. Um, so, so that's a little bit of a fact check right there. So this universal white people, there's actually no such thing. There's a diverse group of cultures that make up white people that have similar looking features. Just like in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, we look very similar, even though Bangladesh they speak Bengali, India and Pakistan they both like speak Hindi, Urdu. It's the same language, but they use two different writing systems. It's kind of weird that way, because you could be saying the same thing, but you could be writing it out in two very different ways. Um, so that's really the difference between Urdu and Hindi. But spoken language is essentially the same. Um, and then if you go into like Northern Europe, like Norwegian, the Danish language. Um, there's like a lot of similarities, so much so that two people speaking two different languages, they can kind of understand each other. Heck, even Germans and Dutch, they can sort of understand each other. Though English, the only reason they'll understand English is because English is now widely spoken. It wasn't always that way though. But other than that, like German and Dutch has more in common with each other than they do with English, even though they're both technically Germanic languages. Um, so that's a little bit of that's the first part of me debunking it. And another thing is like the reason why Europe has become so rich, like the Western world has become so rich, where you can like have like underground sewage systems, is like you essentially like conquered other people and you looted their riches and like you exploited other people and you guys became rich. You guys also took spices from even India, for instance. So you guys took a lot of things from other people to become rich enough where you have your like own kind of sewage system, which is a kind of an irrigation system, kind of like a sewage system where you have like these underground pipes that take so you can flush your toilet and like it goes down. Like this, this hasn't this doesn't really have so much to do with race. It has more to do with just having the wealth to build that kind of infrastructure. Um, yeah, and one more thing, algebra. You know that math class. That's actually an Arabic word. Arabs came up with algebra. Isaac Newton may have invented calculus, but the Arabs, they invented algebra. Even the numerical system that you use, Lilly, that's an Arabic system, and it also has roots with my own culture too. So like in India, like we invented the zero, and so like a lot of like the Indian and like Arabian mathematical ideas came in to creating like the modern day math. Before that, you guys used to use Roman numerals, and those were a real pain in the neck to do any kind of meaningful math with like multiplication, division. Those were a real pain in the neck. So don't you go around saying, "Oh yeah, we're just white people." Oh yeah. And there's one more thing I would say. Sure, you guys are super duper attractive. Um, yeah, but you guys do need sunscreen though. And one more thing though. Yeah, because like since I was like 10 years old, I've had girls hitting up on me, and by the time I was in high school, I had women oftentimes double my age trying to cross that line with me. So, and I once knew a Scandinavian girl. She's Swedish, Hannah Lind. She's kind of a bit of a babyish. She's super duper cute and everything, and really beautiful. Probably also has Asperger's. Yeah. Anyways, I do notice like in the public bathrooms, you guys don't have like any kind of bidet or any type of things like that. So you just wipe your ass with a tissue. And I also use a tissue, but I also use a little bit of water as well. I first wipe it with a tissue, then the water, which is why I try to avoid public bathrooms except for peeing, because I feel dirty. Like the rare cases where I really do have to sit down in the toilet and everything. Um, so I could essentially go for a few days without baths, and I would still be cleaner than your average Western person, simply because my butt's cleaner. Like you guys literally have to take a shower to clean yourselves. And if Hannah was with me right now, and there's like a lot of like personal reasons, it's like why we didn't hit it off. Um, and I later found out that she has Asperger's, and like it made a lot of things make sense. Um, I was able to piece that together. But anyways, so like if Hannah was like with me right now, like, and before getting intimate and all that, I would also want her to be clean too. So there's that. But uh, yeah, there's like a lot of stuff to unpack here, but I'll let her continue.
And that has been white for a lot longer than America has. I think the reason why America is just so obnoxious, fast paced, rude, There's no politeness. We don't really have a distinct culture. We don't dress well. We don't speak well. We don't have, we're not very cultured. It's very crass. Not that I'm one to speak. I do swear like a sailor, but it is what it is. Our culture is depressing, and it's a rat race. And I believe the reason why America, despite the fact that it was settled by Europeans, I think the reason why America has so gone to shit, why it's fast-paced, loud, disgusting, vulgar, rude, embarrassing, loud. I think the reason for that is because we've had non-whites in this country basically from its inception. Slaves were over here pretty early on. So pretty much we've had non-whites in this country. Black people after the civil rights era, when we decided that was a good idea, they were unleashed onto the populace. There was forced integration. Whites were basically forced at gunpoint, actually, there's photos of that happening, to integrate with these people. And then after them came the hordes from the third world, from Mexico, Central America. Farmers were hiring them. Employers were hiring them. They were coming over the border. So we've always had a stream of non-whites in this country, despite the fact that this country was founded on white people. And that is why America sucks. Because brown people ruin countries. Brown people want to live that way. Brown people want to live in squalor. They want to shit in the streets. They want to eat disgusting food, throw trash in the streets, worship retarded gods. Sorry. I'm pretty worn out, by the way, as well.
Bite into real Wisconsin flavor with the new roasted garlic and bacon pub burger at Culver's.
Wait, Lily. What gods did the Romans worship? What gods did the Greeks worship? What gods did, the Vikings worship? What gods did, like, the Celtic people worship? Can you run by that one more time? Yeah, no answer. No answer, as expected.
That culture's fine for them in their own country. That works for them. It works for them. They have no problem with it. They have no problem washing their face in cow dung. Yes, that's happening in India. They have no problem not eating cows because they worship cows, but instead eating vermin and rats. Okay, this is India, of which we speak. Over in Africa, they are fine with eating each other. They are fine with eating cakes made of mud. All these things are true. You can go look it up yourself. That's great for them in their own country. More power to.
And one more thing. So, if you were out in the jungle and you had no access to a restroom, explain to me, what would you do? What would you do? I'll let you answer that one, Lily. Because I'm having fun.
It's disgusting and revolting to me, but I don't have any problem with it in your own country because I would never go to Africa. I would never go to that continent at all. I have no desire to go there at all. White people, on the other hand, we like to build things. We like to invent things. We like beautiful things. We like beauty. I think that's kind of encapsulated in white culture. We make pretty things just for the sake of making pretty things. Art has no purpose aside from beautifying and enriching a culture. And yet we make it. Music really has no purpose other than enriching someone's mind and life and beautifying the culture. Same with architecture. We can make all our buildings utilitarian and brutalist and miserable and just work, provide a function. But instead, we want to put crown molding in our houses. We want our buildings to be beautiful and ornate and have designs on them. We like to have crests as an emblem, we used to, as an emblem of our heritage and our rich families. But now America, as we've been pretty much taken over completely by non-whites, it's been a steady stream, but it's really ramped up in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I was going to say something, but I'm still going to let her continue, actually.
We're now experiencing what it's like to live in a third world country, where we no longer can even access cultural events. Good luck trying to find a concert to go to. Good luck finding a string quartet to listen to. Good luck finding a decent art museum. The last time I went to an art museum in my area, I found the only art museum in the area, and you know what there was on exhibit? It was native art, not even Indian, feather, not dot. It was like Mexican art, and it was disgusting. I went to another art museum, and it was all African art. And do I even need to go into what that looks like? You got to go to the big cities to even find something remotely decent. And even then, you're swamped with woke shit and plays and modern classical music that was written by not the people who wrote the old Baroque classics. Let's just say that. It's disgusting. Our culture sucks. Black culture in particular has been extremely pervasive and detrimental to our culture. During the civil rights era, they were kind of raised up. And then in the 80s, they were looked on as cool. They started making movies about black guys because that's what you want to emulate. Then they started really pushing it hard under Obama. And we've been inundated with this forced integration of you must revere black culture. You must listen to their music. You want to dress like these people. This is exotic and cool. If you want to take a chance to watch a movie that will absolutely turn your stomach, watch the new Elvis Presley movie. They made a movie, it was supposed to be like a biopic or whatever of Elvis Presley's life, and it was disgusting. The only reason I watched that garbage was because I was on a 16-hour flight, and there was Brokeback Mountain to choose from and Elvis. So I chose Elvis. Little did I know that they planned on rewriting the entire thing and saying basically Elvis would have never been Elvis had he not gone to and listened to black artists, and that basically it was black culture that created Elvis. So that's what they've been pushing. They've been pushing this idea that they are the people to be revered. They are the people to be emulated and looked up to. White people, yuck. Concerts, beautiful music, beautiful art, beautiful clothing, aesthetics, architecture, that's gross. Let's look up to Bad Baby. Let's look up to Lil Wayne. Let's look up to black artists with Jewish producers who make garbage music that teaches you to go after bitches like fat asses and gang bang and shoot people up. Okay, I don't listen to rap, so I don't really know what the context is, but from what I've...
Yeah, sorry about that. Like, my system was freezing up on me, so I just had to double check that everything was fine.
Being played loudly in people's cars, when I look over and it's a white guy playing rap music loudly, it makes me physically ill, and I want to flip him off.
I don't drive distracted because my life is too important to me and those who count on me.
But that's why our culture sucks. That's why we don't have good food. We eat snacks, we eat crap. We don't care. You go over to another country like Europe or whatever, France, Italy, Spain, wherever you want to go. Any other country that has not been inundated with non-whites for as long of a time as we have. You go over there and meal times actually matter. They actually put effort into their food. It's an art form because that's what white people do. We like to do our best. We like...
Yeah, okay. So Lilly Gaddis, so she started off with like how forced integration was really, really bad and everything. She does have some level of a point, but here's the thing. When you deprive a group of people for generations, and then suddenly you let them have it all, that's going to cause problems. So first of all, with the Emancipation Proclamation, when the slaves were all freed, they had nowhere to go. They had no property in their names. They had no generational wealth. They were just all on their own. So that created all kinds of logistical problems. And then for a moment they gained a few rights and then they lost them. And then with the civil rights era, with integration and everything, the idea was, you know, to kind of give them access to education, good education, by the way, and not something substandard. And then, of course, there's a lot of woke stuff that happened, which kind of corrupted all of that with Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society, and with the introduction of the welfare state, and then like which intersected with feminism, and then with the birth control pill coming out. So there were these other things that completely corrupted that. So you essentially still ended up creating a subservient class of people, but who are freed and they have equal rights, but in name only, because you're still keeping them hooked up on welfare and everything. So this has nothing to do with the biological supremacy of European people. Like if Lilly were to go into like any kind of, if she were to like be any kind of land, and maybe there's like no people, maybe just animals, just like out in the savannah, and if she's in the sun for too long, or even here in the United States or in any part of the world, with that kind of skin composition, if you're out in the sun for too long, you're gonna mess your skin up. So from a genetic standpoint, I don't know why I would want to have that kind of skin that can get easily messed up from being out in the sun for too long. Unless, of course, it makes you pretty. That would pull someone in. So, humans, we're not always 100% logical. And this whole idea that Europeans are like superior or anything like that, this is like flat Earth. And similar to like flat Earth theory, which actually is actually a recent phenomenon. There was some guy in the 1800s who created like this flat Earth cult. There's even like the Vikings, or even like ancient civilizations that used to like sail around and stuff. Like they all knew that, they all had to understand that the Earth had some level of a curvature, or otherwise they would not be able to navigate the seas and be able to reliably come back. So they at least had an idea that there's some level of a curvature. And you'll see like evidence of this like in ancient cultures, like that they acknowledged, they understood at some level that the Earth was round, or there was some level of curvature. If you look at even like the Incas, and like how you would have like the sun's shadows at different times of the day, they had like a system set up where they would keep track of time and everything. So like people aren't dumb, they aren't stupid. But yeah, so when you have a group of people that were previously poor and then they're suddenly given everything, it's going to cause problems. If, say, in a man to female dynamic, um, if a woman is put in charge where she's running the relationship, things are going to go south real quick. The desire, all of that would be lost. Um, bad decisions would be made. Once that masculine feminine polarity is gone. Um, yeah, and also if you're importing poor people from other parts of the world, it doesn't matter whether you're a white nation or whether you're a Middle Eastern nation. If you're importing poor people, you're going to get some problems. So, like, this is something that anyone with basic common sense can understand. It's like not oh, we Europeans, we're better than everybody. Like, it's really not that thing at all. And when you're talking about architecture and buildings, yeah, Europeans weren't the first people to make buildings. Actually, you guys were the last people to become civilized. Like Northern Europe, like you guys used to be a bunch of tribals. Um, like when Alexander tried to come over to India, um, he suffered heavy casualties, which forced him to go back. So I would say European people, like Western civilization, is probably like the last civilization, because there were previous civilizations before that, and those were mainly in Asia, and among the major civilizations, they would be mainly like in Asia and like Northern Africa, so like Egypt. And the Mayans, the Incas, the Aztecs, they're also pretty strong civilizations themselves too. Like the Incas, or I'm not sure, or the Aztecs, like they had like their own army, they had their own quipo system. It's almost like almost like a writing system, but they used knots and they would communicate that way. So you guys, so like Western civilization isn't like the only advanced civilization to ever exist. Like I love how she acts like, oh, we're like the most advanced civilization of all. Like no, you guys are like not the only ones that could create a sophisticated culture. And in fact, he inherited a lot of things. So like algebra, again, this is Arabian math. The numerical system we use today, that's Arabian. It's like Indo-Arabian. It's like a, yeah. So like Western civilization couldn't achieve what it achieved like if we didn't get the stuff before. It's sort of like you wouldn't have like all this military, all this like the current modern day United States. It would not exist if we did not ratify the Constitution. So similarly, Western civilization could not have formed if it wasn't for like the breakthroughs, discoveries, and accomplishments of the previous civilizations that from which you and from the ashes of those civilizations, the things you were able to take away, you were able to build upon that. So like calculus could not have been derived. Calculus could not have been derived if you didn't have algebra. You wouldn't have algebra if you don't create like the Hindu-Arab or the Indo-Arab numerical system, which took you guys off of using the Roman numerals. So everything has that step-by-step of advancement. It doesn't happen in one fell swoop. Like a lot of like the refined tools that we have Like if we used to use sticks and stones, and then we started using arrows. It just progressed from there, and then like using metal, using bronze and uh, silver, and there is these things called the Bronze Ages and the Silver Ages. Like there's a lot of history that came before, which led to where we are now. So Western civilization didn't just like magically appear and dominate everything. That's essentially what Lilly is deep down believes at the subconscious level. And I'm like, that's just not true, man.
Everything that we do to be done like an art form, because that's something innate in white people, that they want to make art, no matter what they're building, whether they're building a
That's innate in everybody. That isn't doing some kind of crime. That isn't involved in degeneracy. And even those people have that, but their bad behaviors are like suppressing it. It's a pretty human thing. Art is a pretty human thing, and it's innate to human nature. Even with the fossils of like Neanderthals and Denisovans, like you can see like early art. Like it's just funny. Like how can you be like so literate and at the same time so illiterate? To have this kind of and it's really just the conflict between like that duality between emotion and logic. She might logically know a bunch of facts, but her emotions take precedence over that, as with just any regular woman, because women tend to operate and look at the world through more emotions. Men tend to look at things primarily more to logic, and this is especially true for men who have dark triad traits. And those tend to be like the most masculine, to the point where they have like very destructive tendencies, because you want to have that balance between masculine and femininity. Too much of one is bad, or the other is bad. Too much femininity, and you have passive society, and civilization can't advance, and too much masculinity, and it's just like tribal warfare. So there has to be that kind of balance. So people who are naturally more hypermasculine, they might be very arousing to women, but they're also incredibly destructive if they're unable to channel that energy the right way.
Hair, whether they're making a pastry, whether they're making you a coffee, it's beautiful and it's pleasing and it settles the soul and it makes you feel at home there. And you feel at home when you go to those other countries that are mostly white and have been white for a lot longer than we have been, unfortunately. And you just feel like you can finally breathe. You feel like you're at home, and you don't really know why. You're like, I'm not from this country. I don't speak their language. I don't really understand the road signs and the traffic signals, but I feel at ease. We were not meant, white people were not meant to run around like savages. We're above that. We were meant to.
People that looked like you, just go back a couple hundred years, you guys were one of the most savage people. And probably with the crooked teeth, too. Yeah. You need to get your historical facts straight, Lily. This is embarrassing. And it would be kind of interesting too. Like, you'd be kind of scary, but at the same, I think you guys would be more scary because, like, with that same face, and then you're getting attacked by these people, you wouldn't really stop to think that, oh, nice blue eyes and stuff. So I think that just kind of amplifies the scariness factor. But when you're not acting like that, then you're like, oh, pretty. I don't know, it's just kind of strange. You'll be like, How can he be so pretty and so savage? And guess what? You guys used to be pretty darn savage. Before the Romans established their empire, the Germanic tribes, like the ancestors of the modern European people, like you guys were savage. Oh yeah. And like the Celts, the Celtic people, and like the Scottish and those people, like those, and like the German people, like these were people that were very hard for the Romans to conquer. Um, in fact, they couldn't conquer them at all. You guys were so fierce and brutal. Very similar to the original, like the Mongolian tribes, like where Genghis Khan is from. They were also pretty barbaric people. Um, and even like another thing too is like, um, it's funny, like German, Dutch, Danish, um, what else? Finnish, Swedish, Norwegian, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish. All of these languages more or less have the same alphabetical system, and this is all based off of Latin. Your, the alphabets that you use to write is based off of Latin. It's the Latin alphabets. So you guys also didn't even have your own writing system prior to the Romans setting up tent, setting up shop. And that's just wow.
To live our life leisurely because we do things well. We have good engineering minds. Thus, we don't have to be in an office 24 slave.
Yeah, again, that's stuff that you inherited from us. The descendants of previous civilizations. And just like different civilizations when they like interact, like when the Greeks, the Romans, they kind of interacted with, they interacted more directly with, say, Persia, and the Middle East more, and I guess a little bit with India, I guess, especially like the ancient Greeks when you go further back in time. But they interacted more with the Middle East and Persia, and we also interacted with the Middle East and Persia, modern day Iran. So there's like a lot of stuff, a lot of trade and exchanges, so that just kind of builds up civilizations over time. So everything that you see today is the end result of all of those things in the past. Different civilizations, different groups of people interacting with each other. And every interaction, both parties, they fundamentally change for the better or worse. There's something that's added on to the overall culture over time. This is how humans advance. Like even like the founding fathers, when they wrote the Constitution, they were getting a lot of their ideas from the Enlightenment. So this is how, like, we humans, we like to communicate. So this is how communication like affects cultures and even ultimately even governments that we set up, and even our technology too. And even like math, like you couldn't do engineering without math if you didn't know algebra, which again came from the Arabians. Like algebra is an Arabic word.
7, slaving away like a rat. We're supposed to live leisurely, surrounded by beautiful things that enrich our lives and make us feel more at home and happy. And that ultimately stems as well from the fact that white people are predominantly Christian. And that comes from, you know, the otherworldly, if you will. Beauty, aesthetics.
You guys are predominantly Christian because you guys were conquered by the Romans, who later on adopted Christianity after they crucified Jesus. Did they crucify him, or did they end up crucifying Judas in his stead? That's a bit of a debate. Or after they attempted to crucify him. Again, that's a bit of a religious debate between Christians and Muslims. And I guess Jewish people too. So later on with Constantine, they ended up adopting Christianity, and I would go on to say, like, it's not the original Christianity because, you know, they sold their soul in exchange for power. So they kind of made modifications so that way Constantine would agree to it and kind of, you know, accept the ideas. So it's sort of like if two people of two different religions, they came together and they're like, okay, one of them says, okay, I'll worship your God if you worship mine. So they ended up creating like a compromise religion. So something very similar happened here. So what ended up happening is they modified certain things so in order to keep Constantine under control. Because, you know, the Christians were being very heavily persecuted by the Romans. So in exchange for power and safety, they sacrificed their soul. They sacrificed the original religion of Jesus. So now, the current religion you're now looking at is like this shambles, like this modified mess. Because essentially what Christianity says is that God has an alter ego. So like on one hand you're saying that Jesus and God are like father and son, but they're also like alter egos of one another. So Jesus can sometimes take the form of God, and he's not aware of the thoughts of himself when he's in the form of Jesus, and then when he's in the form of Jesus, he's not aware of the of his thoughts as God. So you're also saying that they're one and the same. They're biologically father and son, and they're also one and the same. They're just alter egos of one another. So essentially you're saying that God has a split personality disorder, which is again a bastardization of the original Christianity, which is lost to time.
It's art, music. It's like nature. So that's why America sucks. And there's a few oases in America. There's one, Abington, Virginia. Sorry, I know I'm really rambling today, but I don't really care. I just kind of feel like talking to you guys about this because this has always pissed me off, and I was always wondering, why is America so different? Why are we so completely different? Why does it feel more relaxing in other countries, despite the fact that you don't speak the language?
And part of the reason why it's relaxing is because of poor policies. Very bad policies, largely run by, you know, the left. And Europe is also starting to become like that too, because of leftists. Nothing to do with European blood and their so-called supremacy.
You are almost like an alien in their culture. Why does it feel so nice to be over there? And why is it so stressful here? Why do people honk the horn at you all the time? They won't let you in. Everybody's in a rush. Everybody's angry and tense. It's because that's the culture that's been foisted on us. We never asked for this. We've had third worlders from other countries where they pile up on top of trains, and they
We pretty much take it all. Fridges and dishwashers and dressers, drawers, couches, mattresses, bed frames, concrete.
Shit in the streets, and they leave trash everywhere. And that's fine for them. But that doesn't work well with white people. And white people wilt and fade and die under that.
Trust me, nobody likes that. And if you go into like medieval Europe, so like they didn't have like a modern day sewage system, so they would have these buckets and they would have these schlops they would send out into the street. Like if you're saying like you guys were a more advanced group of people, for the longest time you guys were not. Really, you were not. You guys, like Europeans, very recently became clean and polished. Very, very, very recently in their long history as savages and barbarians. And most of that history was before Rome established itself in Europe. Before that, you guys were just a bunch of tribals. And even after Rome, so like in feudal Europe, like when before Renaissance, during the Dark Ages, things were not good. Things were really not good. And the sewage is just like a joke.
We're not happy. That's why people aren't wanting to have kids, because they feel unfulfilled. And they're always striving. And that could even be why you see people never wanting to grow up. They don't want to grow up because they don't want to face the reality of this hellhole that we live in. They want to remain a kid forever. They don't want to grow up. So you have all these copes that white people have been having to do because our culture's been forcefully stripped away from us.
I mean, not wanting to grow up is largely part of this is driven by like culture and propaganda. Part of this is not wanting to grow up. Like if someone were to came up to me and like I saw like they don't want to grow up, it's more of a them, like a you problem. So that's more of also a personal problem too. And sure, it could be like a form of escapism. And this is especially seen in people who don't really have much of a direction in life. That's the whole not wanting to grow up. And which can affect anybody of any demographic, race, or biological composition.
Our societies have been turned into reflections of the third world. We now have to fight in line and fight for our lives amongst people who should never have been here to begin with. We have to fight in the aisles of grocery stores. We have to compete with these third worlders who stock up on things. And if you don't go in there and start scrapping like the rest of them...
Why do you think they stock up on things? Like buy things in stock, buy things in mass. So that way you can have that later on. So you don't have to go up to the grocery store as much. Long-term thinking, long-term provisioning.
Well, you'll miss out. And that's what's happened to American society. And there is no fixing that unless a radical leader comes to power and the people with a collective mind, with a collective determination, decides to do something about it. Decides to say...
Wait, Lily, are you now starting to become a war hawk now? Really? A war hawk? Like the first Civil War wasn't bad enough, you want another one? Really, Lily? Good grief. So what happened to like not wanting to like engage in foreign wars? You're creating trouble at home now? Come on. It gotta be better than this, Lilly.
And these people back to where they came from. These people don't like it here. Just as we feel at home when we're surrounded by non-whites, they feel the same way. But instead of going back to their own home countries, they decided, well, we're just going to take yours, and then we'll turn it into a version of Africa or India over here. That's what they want. That's why when you go to the ghetto, that's why when you go to Indian sides of town, it all looks different, smells different, has a different energy in the air. It's because we're being occupied and we're being taken over. And this was forced upon us by a cabal of people who have usurped and destroyed our politicians through blackmail, assassinations, nepotism.
I mean, yeah, like when you have a different group of people starting to like move into land and like start to make it more like their culture. I totally get that. And then there's like policies in place that favor immigrant hires over the American citizens, and this is largely, you know, policies like the H-1B visa, which is exploitive on both ends. So you're exploiting the immigrant by paying them less than what they would have earned if they were a full American citizen, and you're exploiting the American citizen by forcing them to put up with this and not get the jobs that they should. So it's exploitive on both ends. But anyways, and yeah, I'm also against that too. And this is not only because I'm also an American citizen myself too, but just when you look at it practically, this is just bad all across. So you might want to put more of that blame on the politicians who wrote up that law and on the law itself, and for also importing poor people. You don't want to ever import poor people. And the poor people that you end up typically importing are going to either come from like Africa or like the Caribbean or from South America. Because those of us who come from Asia, we're usually on the richer side. So you're better off. So if you're going to pick between a poor immigrant versus a rich immigrant, pick the rich one. Because the rich one is going to add more value. Or if you're not, or rich or talented. So they could be from a rich or a poor family, but if they're either talented or from a rich family, they're going to do you good. So again, this has, all of those points that she's making has more to do with just being dealt with a nice set of hands. It's just Western civilization was at a very unique point in history where it was able to incorporate a lot of the advancements from previous civilization and build what we have right now. So that's part of it has to do with just being dealt with that unique set of hands. And what else was I gonna say? So for accounting for like the advancement, so that unique set of hands, and then like having people like Albert Einstein. I mean, Albert Einstein came up with this theory relatively. He didn't really invent much, but like people like Nikola Tesla, Alexander Graham Bell, these great inventors, by the way. Like you can't just say, "Oh, white people did this." No, it's these individuals: Alexander Graham Bell. Who was the guy who invented the light bulb? forget his name for a moment. Thomas Edison, yeah. He's really not so much of an inventor. He's more of a, he takes previous inventions and he's more of a businessman, because like he was the one who kept tinkering around with light bulbs until he made one that could actually work, that can commercially be implemented. So he's not really that much of an inventor in that kind of way. Or maybe he is. Maybe he did invent some stuff, but like the light bulb, he definitely did not invent. That was already invented before. He just tinkered with it. He invented the first practical light bulb, which is the incandescent light bulb. So you have people like Thomas Edison. You've got Nikola Tesla. You got Alexander Graham Bell. You got the Wright brothers who invented the airplane. These are individual people that push things forward. Not something that you guys collectively as a race came up with. You guys just were dealt with just the unique set of cards, or a unique, a lucky set of hands, that you had these kind of good people, and they had the kind of upbringing that they did that ultimately led them to becoming who they were. And then just being at that point in history, so like with colonialism and everything, like Western civilization being at the height of its power and wealth, need to replay this because there's something like I kind of forgot what I was going to say, but I need to kind of like.
We are an occupied country, and we're in a state of decay. Usurped and destroyed our politicians through blackmail, assassinations, nepotism. We are an occupied country, and we're in a state of decay. It's decayed from the inside out and from...
Yeah, so going back to that line of thought, so you do that kind of, you import, so what I was originally saying, so like, no matter what culture you are, if you import poor people, or if you import people who are economically in a lower position than you are, you're adding a liability. Versus if you import someone who's rich, or at least equal to you in wealth or social status, or someone who's talented, then you can add something to your society instead of a liability which would detract, take away from your society. So this has nothing to do with, oh, Europeans being such a supreme race. Oh. You guys are cute, I'll give you that. Real cute. Even the men. The men make me real friggin' jealous, by the way. I'll give you guys that. And you guys did have some good inventors. You guys did invent a good legal system, especially with America's Constitution and the idea of a representative republic, which originated from Rome, by the way. And then the concept of democracy, which originated in Greece. You know, with when the city-states like Sparta and Athens, they were all like formed. So I'll give you guys credit where it's due. But in no way, shape, or form are you guys superior to any other civilization in the terms of raw thinking capacity or raw capability to like produce. The reason why you guys are in a more technologically advanced state is simply because of the advancements of the previous civilizations, which compounded and brought us humans to the current state we are at right now. Because if Europeans became civilized and started off maybe back during Mesopotamian times, you guys would be just as advanced as the Mesopotamians were. or if you guys started off during the Egyptian times, you guys would be just as advanced as they were, more or less. So it kind of largely depends on politics and um, a lot of administrative stuff, and politics tends to be very nasty. So um, uh, there's like a lot of fighting, and like prior to representative republics, prior to like the modern day concept of democracy, power was taken by force. So it largely depended on the force and like how different people kind of like. Well, you get the idea. So that largely would affect like advancements in technology and knowledge, especially like how like Genghis Khan and his people, like they destroyed a very important library in Baghdad. So so situations like that could trigger a kind of like a black swan, kind of a dark ages type of event. So it largely depends on all of that. Not so much of, oh yes, we're so superior, we're the white people. Not so much that. Like, I'm sorry, Lily, but you're like the equivalent of a modern day flat earther. Like, if you truly believe that. And I think this is like logic. Like, she's not a dumb person, but like, this is kind of her own emotions and just some bullshit that her parents probably taught her is just kind of getting in the way of her like actual logical reasoning. So we're gonna help her out and kind of knock that shit out of her head that fast. Oh yeah, Lily, come on, you can snap out of it.
From the outside in. Not only are our borders basically non-existent because they haven't been patrolled and people are allowed to come in, and there's not that many deportations except for MS-13 gang members and violent criminals, and we've rotted from the inside as well.
Most of the deportations are actually of Indians who had expired H-1B visas, and even certain green card holders who had their green cards expire. Those would be the vast majority of deportations, and these would be the overwhelming. This is not just vast majority, the overwhelming majority of deportations and overwhelming majority of people who are in ICE custody. Because gang members tend to be very savvy people. Like, you have to understand, like, a gang or a mafia or like some kind of like don like that, this is like essentially a mini government. So they have hierarchy, they have different positions. It may not be like a sophisticated bureaucracy like in a formalized regime, but they do have like their own way of keeping track of things and like who does what. They have their own record keeping system. And it may not necessarily be an office where you're shuffling papers, because that's what formalized, more sophisticated governments do. But when you have a proto-government, prior to like say America ratifying the Constitution, we would have like conventions and stuff. So we used to have like militias and everything. So in this case, gang members, they're kind of like their own militia. And they have like their own chain of command of how they do things. And they have their own way of keeping records, like the more sophisticated gangs. Heck, some gangs, like, where Al Capone came from, like his wife got benefits after he was executed. So they're essentially a mini government. So these type of people, they're going to be very, very hard to crack down upon. Like the more sophisticated gangs. And like, people like to think that governments tend to be safe, but there's always an element of crime in any form of government, whether that be like an actual like gang, or whether that be like actual formalized government. And oftentimes there's like dirty cops. There's also like corrupt people in different positions of power in different regimes. like take Netanyahu for instance. He was a part of a terrorist organization, which later became legitimized with him taking power in Israel by becoming its prime minister. He sabotaged the Oslo Accords through assassinations. Uh, like this guy was originally a gang member. So like in my video earlier today, I was like saying like, Charlie, what the heck were you thinking when he wrote that letter? Like that letter is a big part of what probably got him killed. Is like these people you're talking to, like not too long ago they were kind of like terrorists, like kind of like gang members type of people, and they're just, the only difference is like they're now in a position of power and legitimized as a public figure. Thing with gang members is like the mafia dons is they're the head of their gang, so they're the head of their government, but they're not like a public type of figure. And most politics, and here's the thing, governments prior to democracy being a thing, there was really not much of a press. It was very, very private. Like monarchies, it's very, very private actually. Press became more of a thing after like the invention of democracy, after the invention of parliaments, the invention of representative republics. That's when news became more of a thing. Because before that, governments acted very similar to like how mafias operate, in secret. And the most effective regimes generally tend to be very very authoritarian. Like the regimes that tend to be very effective at getting its job done, they tend to be authoritarian, and the least effective regimes generally tend to be democracies. The least effective of all was the Athenian democracy, where people could vote and decide to have you killed. Like if enough people voted to have you killed, you would be killed. So that kind of a government pretty much relies on the whims of the people and very quickly fell apart. And on the other extreme is you have very authoritarian regimes. Take for instance Genghis Khan's regime, and everything is secrecy. They were very good at building. They were especially like establishing the silk routes. Like you could go from one, like a girl could go from one end of Genghis Khan's empire, walk from one end to the other without getting raped. Like that's how much of an iron fist his regime was. Only in the modern times do we have public figures showing popping up in front of the camera. But the real government work is actually done in the dark, in secrecy. Yeah, and again, this kind of like differentiates between you and me, Lily. You're just some regular ass YouTuber. I'm the one who's actually proposing actual policies. If you look at my YouTube channel, which I'm building up, there's like actual policies. If you like, there's like actual policies that I'm like proposing. Like if you look at like this is actual policy. So in a very recent video, I was talking about like how I updated the paternity fraud clauses. So you're getting a glimpse of that. And if you go upwards, you talk about child custody, and like I'm actually coming up with actual legal policy. Like you could take this to Congress and vote on it, and it would become law. And if you want to make this part of the Constitution, you would take this to Congress. They would they would vote on it and send it to the states, and then it would be ratified, and then it would become law. It would become part of the Constitution. And my end game is to actually make this part of the Constitution. So that's a bit of a glimpse of what I have here. So that's the difference between you being a regular YouTuber versus me, who actually knows what he's doing and knows what he's saying. Good grief, Lily. Like the reason why I'm actually doing this kind of YouTube channel, this is part of a broader lobbying effort. Like, I already have like my own legal proposal built. Now it's to get the funding. So since I'm not working on a corporation, I'm working on my own. So I gotta find ways to grab people in and eventually start financing and building a campaign to change certain laws. Which, by the way, your cherished white people, Lily, they're the ones who came up with these stupid-ass feminist laws. Which, by the way, is destroying our country. It has completely ruined the dynamic between men and women. And the reason why the family laws are so horrible and so predatory. And all at the expense of men. It's white people who uniquely are the ones who came up with these type of absolutely predatory laws. Like, this is psychopathic level predatory. Your cherished white people. Yeah, sure. I've had white girls show interest in me, and I've had a few flings here and there. So I'm not racist like you in that sense. Sure, I do have a bit of racial pride myself, but I'm not delusional like you. And you're still among the better ones, by the way. There are some people who are like so delusional of their white supremacy. Is like, if they see anything that is not white, it makes their skin curl. So you're not quite at that level. You're kind of getting there. But like, you could probably be reasoned with, sort of, I think. And who knows, maybe you're just doing this just to get clicks and views, but I think this is just all you. You genuinely believe this type of shit. But anyways, yeah, like that's like the difference between like a regular YouTuber who's just blabbering versus someone who actually knows what they're saying and doing.
Our politicians are entirely corrupt. I don't think there's a single elected politician in the US politics today that actually has America's interest at heart. There might be people working behind the scenes, and we know there are, but they're not the people who make the rules. So what we have to do as white people is we have to identify with our race. We have to collectivize. We have to have a collective plan. It can't just be one rally here and one rally there where the rest of America is like, well, I don't like that. That seems right.
Okay, I'm gonna finish this off, Lily. So, okay, so what you're saying is what this is how you would start a revolution. But who gets the actual laws written in? Because the thing that it takes to start a revolution and writing the actual rules and implementing the rules and setting up the administration, it requires two different mindsets and two very different kinds of energies. It's almost like, like Casey Zander, like he talks about this, like what gets you laid is very different than what's gonna help you retain the relationship. So what will get you, what will fire up an actual revolution is very different than what will ultimately establish or maintain a regime. So it's like, so with relationships, there's like different kinds of energies. So like the vibe. So how you carry yourself to get that girl to sleep with you is going to be very different to retaining her interest for the long haul, and the traits that you need to have. So similarly, like what you're saying, the things you're talking about, like people getting organized culturally, yes, that would start a revolution. But the things that you need, like the actual brains for putting together a new regime or putting together a new set of laws and rules and enforcing that, is a very different set of things altogether, and has little to nothing to do with cultural identity or all this emotionalism, because it's very cold-blooded and very pragmatic. So, and I would know because I came up with a lot of the legal proposals myself, and a lot of the stuff that I wrote down is like, it's very cold-blooded. Very, very cold-blooded. Some of the stuff I wrote down is harsh, like saying that people, like you commit paternity fraud and you being put behind bars or put into community service for like at least 18 years, and then you don't get free unless you pay everything off. So you pay off like the person who's legal fees, and you pay off every bit of money that they've invested in you and the child. And they find out that the child is not his, and you don't get free until you until all of that is paid off. Like, these are very, very harsh rules. And originally, the community service part was not even there. It was just straight up prison. So these are very, very harsh rules. So if you want to create like an organized society, some of the rules have to be really, really harsh. Like if you want to have a society where like the dynamic between men and women isn't so funky, and that kids have a stable family life at home, you need to have like really harsh punishments for certain types of behaviors. And these type of punishments, like in the Sharia law and in the Mosaic law in Judaism, like for adultery, very, very harsh laws. And I intentionally did not include that in my legal proposal, because I think it would be. I think just punishing paternity fraud should be enough to scare the daylights out of people who are thinking of cheating. And also like the implementation side of it. So like with English common law, the law is followed to the letter, whereas with Sharia law, it's more conditional. So if you combine English common law, and then you say that you're going to ban adultery, then you're going to have CIA level spying on people's personal lives. So I didn't want to go that route. Whereas with the Sharia law, unlike English common law, it's more conditional. So so you could have two people who committed the same crime, and they could be treated very differently because of different circumstances. And it can also depend on the judge too. The English common law does have some kind of leeway, so like once you get a guilty verdict, the judge can decide what your sentence can be. So if the law has different tiers of punishments, the judge can decide on the particular tier. But again, you're still following things to the letter. Whereas in Sharia law, there's certain laws that are not enforced under certain or certain punishments that are not given under certain conditions. So English common law doesn't work like that. So that's a big part of the reason why I didn't do that. So like as for like being punished for adultery, you would have to either have 4 witnesses. Like in my religion, you would have to have either 4 witnesses, male witnesses. So because female witnesses count as half of the male witnesses, so you have to have the equivalent of 4 male witnesses. And And if you think that half of a male witness, like, you think that's sexist, if you're caught up with the red pill and the manosphere, and if you look at the how men and women think very differently, and once you understand like that men and women, like women tend to look at life through a very rosy colored emotional lens. When you start to understand that, like, it'll start to make sense why ancient societies had these type of rules. But anyways, so you would have to have the equivalent of 4 male witnesses, or the person would have to confess against him or herself 4 times. The person would have to be pubescent. The person cannot be insane. And the punishment can also be given. It can only be given if you're under the jurisdiction of a Sharia country, and under proper Islamic Sharia, there's not a single country in the world that is following the Sharia law, the proper Islamic Sharia law. So part of the requirement is also having a country that's, or regime that is, where the Sharia law is established. If it's not established, none of the laws can be enforced. So that's part of the requirement. And say somebody stole something, for instance, and if there's like famine going on, you cannot punish them, because the standard punishment is like cutting off their hands. You cannot do that because that person's starving. So in that case, them committing theft is excusable. And another reason why we have this type of conditional things is, like, if people just decided to like try to enforce the law on their own, in their own way, you'll just have different people just cutting off people's hands, feet, arms, and legs. So it's kind of to avoid that. So we'd rather not enforce the law than to have just people run around who are not as well versed with the actual law, and just run around like cutting each other's limbs. And unlike a Western society where you have democracy and like elections, and unlike authoritarian regimes where you have like full-blown dictatorship, under the Sharia law, you would essentially have like a philosopher state. You would have scholars who would actually be the ones who in power, and they would kind of cycle back and forth amongst themselves who would get into power. Which is also like, again, any form of government is like susceptible to corruption, and all governments at some point will fail one way, shape, or form. It just so happens that representative republican governments just tend to be outstanding in its ability to maintain itself, because it's essentially resistant to corruption, because people can vote a bad guy out of power. So there's like term limits and stuff like that. Well, not term limits, like term limits does play a role, but like term limits, like how many terms they can be elected, but like there's like a fixed amount of time that they can hold power before requiring being elected again. So in a way, the American dream experiment is resistant to corruption in this way. Because like in other types of governments, other systems of government, like if corruption made its way in, the only way to fix that is to completely dismantle the government. So it would pretty much require war. Whereas here you have just politicians, and you're just cycling back and forth between 2 different political parties. I mean, it's still not a true representative republic, because you're essentially having 2 major political parties who are essentially running the show. It is still kind of like an authoritarianism, kind of a dictatorship. But again, because of the nature of the system, it's very, very resistant to corruption, so you don't have to like go into civil war as often as other countries might, where you end up having a coup and regime overthrows. That kind of stuff really doesn't happen here in the US, because of like the system of government makes it so that it kind of resets itself. But the cost is that you cannot enforce a moral standard. So that's the cost that comes with it. Whereas you have other systems of government where you can enforce a moral standard, but it comes at the cost of very rigid social norms. So there's certain freedoms that are sacrificed to maintain a moral standard. And because of that, once corruption festers in, it very quickly becomes a dictatorship and becomes a very bad hellhole, like Kim Jong-un, North Korea type of shit, you know. Because it's much easier to consolidate power once corruption makes its way into those type of systems of government versus the American system of government, where you can't really consolidate power in that kind of way. So that's all I have for now. And remember this woman's face. I was originally thinking of like playing the whole video, but I think I've reacted as much as I could. So I'm just gonna wrap it up, and I gotta say, that's all I have for now, and I'll just see you on the next one.